Good morning, everyone. It's the June 13th meeting of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee, and we're here to take up two items and show my cards. This is going to be quick today. All right, so Ms. Wellens, you've prepared a packet for us on Bill 522, which relates to the Economic Development Corporation's Board of Directors, and we're joined today by Jake Weissman from the Executive Branch, Ben Wu from the Executive Branch, and Stacy Harding. Thank you. You're COO? VP of Operations. Thank you. MCEDC. Stacy Harding. I see you there. Great. Christine.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair and council members. As you said, before you is Bill 5-22, Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors membership. This bill was requested by the county executive on behalf of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, MCEDC. The bill does three things, all related to the membership of the Board of Directors of MCEDC. First, the bill would change the number of voting members of the board from 11 to 13. Second, the bill would remove one of the current voting members, which is a member of the Workforce Development Board, and it would replace that voting member with an ex officio the CEO of the county's workforce development organization. That would essentially codify current practice in which the Workforce Development Board currently tends to designate the CEO of the Workforce Development Organization as their member on the board. Third, the bill would provide that the immediate past chair of the MCEDC Board of Directors is an ex officio, will become an ex officio member of the board in order to lend that expertise and provide some additional continuity in the board. So there are a couple of different decision points noted in the packet if you'd like me to walk through those, but it's essentially just, whether the committee wishes to move forward with those three aspects of the bill, the three different changes to the membership.
Okay, great. Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Friedson. Thank you and Mr. Juando for your consideration of this bill. As Ms. Wellens pointed out, this is a bill that the county executive introduced by a request to the council on our behalf. We want to thank the council and the committee for your consideration. Also to thank the county executive for his courtesies in supporting the introduction of the bill, and also Ms. Wellens for the work that she has done as staff. In 2016, the Montgomery County's economic development efforts and operations were transformed, and they were moved from what was then a governmental entity for the Department of Economic Development to the newly created Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. MCDC is overseen and governed by a board of members of the business community and representing industry. And the intention was to have industry-led solutions for economic development, to work with government and to work and partner with the business community and external shareholders that would make our economy as vibrant and as strong as possible. So we've had 6 years of operations, and as the coming session concludes for our board, we're going to have 6 board members term out, and these are all original board members. And as a consequence, it allows us to take a pause and to see how we can best continue with the structuring of the board. And the feeling was that we would benefit from more institutional memory and also the major reason for the expansion of the board was to allow for there to be 2 new board members that could come in prior to the conclusion of the board membership for the 6 original board members. At MCDC, we have a bylaw that says that the board members need to term out after 6 years in order to bring in new blood, new thinking, and new energy and enthusiasm to the organization. And even though the board members have staggered terms, these are all original board members, and so they are guided by our own internal MCDC bylaws, which says that a board member can serve no more than 6 years. So as a consequence, the thinking was that, and the compelling reason for the introduction of the bill was to be able to bring in 2 additional board members prior to the extinguishment of the original 6 board members. The chronology of the board's, the legislation's introduction, however, we passed that point. While there were a myriad of reasons to expand the board, the most compelling one is one that is no longer as compelling. And then the other feeling was that we would benefit from continued engagement and service of our immediate past chair, which is typical for a number of nonprofit organizations in order to have continuity and also retention of institutional memory. And then the third component was to clarify the role of the CEO of Worksource Montgomery. Traditionally, that representative has been the person who represents workforce development issues. And historically that's been the case, and it's currently the case also with Anthony Featherstone, and then prior with his predecessor too. So we're offering a clarification so that we can continue that arrangement, because that seems to work well, because being able to have the head of Workforce Montgomery with our board, and then I also serve in a reciprocal manner with the Workforce Development Board. We were able to share resources, we're able to leverage each other's assets, and it's a good arrangement that we would like to continue to, and that would clarify the legislation. So those are the 3 components of the bill before you, and we would welcome any thoughts or considerations that you may have. We also do appreciate, as Ms. Wellen said in the memo, for this to be placed on an expedited track so that we can have, with the passage of the bill, we can have the bill in effect as we transition into the new board so that we can begin with this clarification and this structure in place when our new board, the newly reconstituted board, reconvenes sometime in September. And then also we can begin our board orientations as needed and onboarding for the new board members. So thank you for your consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Great. All right, thank you. I've got Councilmember Friedson, followed by Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. Appreciate all the comments here. A couple things. One, as colleagues know, I serve as an ex officio member of the board on behalf of the council, as does Mr. Weissman on behalf of the executive branch. So wanted to note that. I'm supportive of adding the 2 seats. I think that there's ample reason to believe that a bigger board would allow for more representative board members, would allow for more talent to do more work on behalf of economic development, which we need, particularly when you're talking about busy people. If you have 1 or 2 absences at an individual board meeting, you are reducing and restricting the number of people that can do this important work. So I know there's an interest from the board chair and from the board. I do think that if there is any concern about adding 8 new seats all at once, we could stagger the 2 additional board seats to make that part of the bill effective at a later date. You know, the expansion, to begin December 31st, January 1st, some date as we move forward, which would allow more time to bring the additional two on board and create some of the staggering that may be of interest to colleagues. I do think the workforce development partnership is critical. I think codifying that into law is important. I do think that the board should stay odd numbered, and so I think ex officio would be appropriate. But I think it's important to have the odd number for a functioning board to take the votes. And similarly, I think the expedited aspect of the bill in total matters. One, for the workforce development piece of it, but most importantly, for the terming out of the board chair. I think that's one of the more important aspects of this bill, to have the immediate past president, which it's known in nonprofit world, by the way, the three best words in volunteering: immediate past president, but that the immediate past president isn't off the hook so easily, and will continue to serve in the ex officio non-voting role. So I just wanted to put my cards out on the table in the interest of the speedy meeting that the chair has envisioned here, but I think we should move forward with the bill. I think we should make it expedited. I think we should keep the workforce development piece as part of it, and make it ex officio to ensure the odd number of the board, just for functioning operations. And I am open to and interested to hear from colleagues, but if we wanted to make the two additional board seats effective at a later date that we could include even in an expedited bill, I think that would be appropriate and make sense. So I'll yield back.
Included at a later date in this expedited bill, or in a different expedited bill?
No, in this, but there's two board seats. I can yield to Ms. Wellens on this. The bill itself could be expedited, which would mean that the entirety of the bill would be expedited. But within the bill, you can have something begin at a specific date certain, and so the two additional seats would be effective. We could be effective at a particular date, whatever is the will of the council and of the committee.
Do we really need the two additional seats? I guess that's my threshold question. Mr. Weissman, and then Mr. Jawando wants to direct some questions here.
I appreciate it, and thank you for the support, council member. And I do want to just obviously defer to the wisdom of the committee when it comes to the decision on the effective dates. Do want to just assure the council we are dotting the I's, crossing the T's on the 6 new appointees, and the council will have those very soon. When it comes to 2 new members, I've had a lot of conversations with members of the MCDC board over the last week, and the overwhelming feeling is that these 2 additional members would be helpful, both in terms of diversity of industry that can bring more to the table, but also to help the board better tackle all the different viewpoints and make sure that the voice of the business community is more present in some of the decisions in MCDC.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
We're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Just extremely faintly. I'm not. That's.
Okay. Let's see here.
Is our technology team listening?
Is that better, worse, the same?
Yeah, we can't. Unfortunately, we really can't hear you. If there's a question you want me to ask, you can text me, and I'll ask on your behalf while we try to resolve this.
Sure. Can you not? So you can't hear me?
Well, speak your question, and I'll try to repeat it for everyone.
Okay.
I can.
So the question is, well, I agree with Councilmember Friedson about adding the members. Mr. Weissman just underscored that. The question I have is related to the Workforce Development Board membership of Mr. Featherstone in this case. Is there still the suggestion, I was unclear from Mr. Wu's comments, to make that member non-voting? Was that still the request or not?
I heard Mr. Featherstone. That's as much. Mr. Weissman, did you catch that?
I believe, and Councilmember Chiwando, please just, I don't know, wave or something if I'm incorrect. I believe your question was, is the proposal still to make the Worksource Montgomery director a non-voting member of the board? Is that correct?
Okay.
Yeah, under the legislation as proposed, it would make them a non-voting member, both to keep the number odd, to ensure there's not an even number, but also it's the same ex officio non-voting setup as the council, as the executive, and as they're a quasi-governmental entity. I think there was the thought of keeping it all kind of level in that regard.
Okay, can you hear me any better now, or is it the same?
Just barely.
No.
Okay.
It's a little better, actually, but yeah.
Keep leaning in.
Okay, and so Mr. Wu does not vote on their board, and is there anyone else on the board that, from Workforce Development, that does have a vote?
I'm sorry. We didn't catch that.
I'm gonna text you.
Was your question, is there anybody else from the workforce development side that has a voting?
Nice.
Impressive.
Well, Pete.
Ben, Stacy, Adam. The question was, is there anybody else from the workforce development board that has voting? I believe now there's
Yes.
on the MCEDC board.
Correct.
Council staff is saying there is no one.
Yeah, historically, since the beginning of MCDC, the person who was representing the workforce development, workforce development representative was Mr. Featherstone's predecessor. So from the very inception of the organization, the representative has always been the head of Worksource Montgomery, even though the legislation may have suggested that that representative should be somebody from the Workforce Development Board. So this provision in the legislation would clarify that we continue to have the participation of the head of the Worksource Montgomery.
But in a non-voting capacity. Just to be clear, in response to Councilmember Joando's point, there would not be, under the bill as drafted, there would no longer be a voting member from the Workforce Development Board, unless, the executive separately decided to appoint someone who happened to fill that role.
Yeah, I just wanted to note the 2 additional seats would provide an opportunity to include additional perspectives, which, by the way, could include, at the will of the county executive and the support of the council, somebody with a workforce development background specifically. Now, WorkSource is focused on workforce development, and EDC is focused on economic development, but there's a lot of overlap in that work, and so that's, by virtue of the fact that there is a recognition of a inclusion on the board, and the fact that the 2 organizations share space. I mean, literally operate in the same virtual theoretical space and the same literal workspace.
Yeah, and if I could just add, Mr. Friedson, that that commingling of priorities for WorkSource and economic development is so important for our efforts. And so we've intentionally gone out to partner in a greater fashion with WorkSource Montgomery, and Mr. Featherstone, as head of Worksource Montgomery, has been very receptive. This is also in line and aligns with the Montgomery County Economic Development Strategic Plan, which the council ratified at the end of May. So we see great synergies between our 2 organizations, and we also have shared, not just co-located, but we also have shared employees that work in conjunction and collaboration in order to make sure that we have a bridge between our 2 organizations. We also have a number of initiatives and programs and partnerships that we do, so we don't want to lose that, and that's one of the reasons why retaining the head of Worksource Montgomery is so critical, we believe, to be a member of our board.
Yeah. Can you all hear me or no?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
He asked if we could hear him.
Yeah, I guess you can't hear me. So, okay. Thank you for the answering the question.
Soft talk. Council parody day.
Well, can you share for us again why the rationale for changing the Worksource board role from voting to non-voting was, share with us again. Mr. Wu or Mr. Weissman, yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll abide by whatever decision the council and the committee decide to take. The initial thinking was that because we're designating a person, a position in essence, and other positions have been designated as opposed to being appointed by the executive with the confirmation of the council, then therefore that person should hold a ex officio position.
And just to be clear, under the current statute, the county executive is supposed to appoint a member of the Workforce Development Board. And my understanding is in the past that's been just deferred to be the executive director. I think the board has made that request, and county executives have signed off on it. The other reason is if the Worksource Montgomery executive director is a voting member of the board, you have 14 voting members of the board or 12 voting members of the board, which is obviously an even number, which you want to avoid doing. But because it is a designated individual of a quasi-governmental entity, if we're kind of just being honest about the fact that it is similar to MCEDC, that it's a organization that is funded largely by the county government and chosen to serve on the board as that individual, as opposed to one of the 20 members of the workforce and business community and nonprofit community who serve on the Worksource Montgomery board. I think thinking is to not make sure that their voice is heard and part of it, but not having a voting role.
Okay.
And structurally be consistent with the ex officio from the council,
Right.
Mr. Friesen, and also the ex officio from the executive, which is Mr. Wiseman.
Okay. All right. I'm satisfied with that. All right, so we have, the bill is drafted, takes us to 13 members, which I'm comfortable with. So does anyone, all right. And then the bill is drafted, substitutes the voting member for the non-voting, what we've discussed.
Formalizes that it's the executive director.
Formalizes that it's the executive director and makes it non-voting. Right. So the executive director will always be on the board as an ex officio member. There's no limit on the number of Workforce Development Board members who could be on the MCEDC board, so the executive could appoint a voting member who is, there could be overlap there. Someone could serve on both boards. All right. Are there any other amendments to consider? I want to, Councilmember Juando, are you okay with that? Your thumbs up, okay.
Yeah, the only question would be the timing. I mean, I was yielding to colleagues whether there was an
Right.
interest of that or not. I mean, realistically, if this were approved in an expedited fashion, it would still,
Okay.
if you're ready with the other 6, and it would take time, it's just a question of when the appointment, my only thinking was
Give them a breather.
give a breather. There's,
Okay, that makes
some
sense.
political change in the county. I think this provides an opportunity for the new government to be set up before those decisions are made, allows us to get our sea legs.
It is germane because
a
of
little bit.
quorums, right? I mean, you have to have a quorum of a board, so.
Yeah, that's the reason why I raised it. You could have 2 vacancies for a fairly substantial period of time from a governance standpoint. I just wouldn't want to put the organization in an unreasonable
Okay.
position if county government isn't prepared to appoint quickly. And, so I just, it would give some
So-
time to think through what the holes are, where we could do outreach for new board members to serve the purpose of, I think, what the 2 board seats were doing. So I think delaying to January 1st perhaps would be appropriate.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Councilmember Juando, all right, thumbs up. And we'll get precise language as we proceed, Christine, before full council.
Great, absolutely. That should be quite straightforward. So I'll prepare that for full council. Thank you.
All right, great. With no further ado, all in favor of the bill as amended? Show of hands. All right, very good. That's unanimous. Thank you. All
Thank you,
right.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you. And our next legislation is a regulation, and it's for the Rise Zone. And Gene?
Good morning. As you noted, we're going to be talking about Executive Regulation 2-22. I'm joined by our colleagues here in the executive branch, as well as by our colleagues and partners from Montgomery College. Should there are many questions related to the RISE zone, and RISE stands for Regional Institution Strategic Enterprise Zone. As noted in the staff report, the council received this in March, late March, and the council extended time to consider it till late September, knowing that we would hopefully get through it in the summer. It's a method 2, so the council has the choice to approve, disapprove, or let it go into effect. The purpose of ER, or Executive Regulation 222, is to implement the administration of the RISE zone in Germantown. For the sake of time, I'll just note that back in 2018, the council considered and supported the college's application for a RISE zone. It was approved as a regional institution in 2018, and then it also at the end of September was approved by the state as a RISE zone. A RISE zone is similar, at least previously, as the enterprise zone, which provides real property tax credits for improvements made in the zone, as well as for income tax credits for new jobs in the zone. They also receive additional income tax credits businesses do for certain individuals that meet certain requirements by the state law. As noted in the staff report, in the 2021 General Assembly, the state amended the RISE zone benefits. At the beginning of 2023, the real property tax credits as well as the income tax credits will be phased out for this zone, and then the zone will have the opportunity to, with the college and the county and MCDC or any other organizations we want to partner with, to create a business rental assistance program. But the two main tax credits that are associated with enterprise zones and the RISE zone previously, the real property tax credits and income tax credits, will phase out. Similar, I was going to say, sorry, I apologize. I just wanted to catch up on my notes. Similarly to enterprise zones, the Department of Finance will administer this. As noted in the staff report, Finance doesn't anticipate any additional staff time or resources needed. It'll be incorporated into their existing staffing complement. The RISE zone boundaries on Circle 12 in the shaded purple. It's with the Germantown Montgomery College campus. It has several pads there that are available. As always, applications, the business will have to either apply for real property tax credits based on their improvements or for income tax credits and be approved by the administrator or by Department of Finance. And then also, as noted, the executive regulation does apply retroactively, although there are no businesses, there have been no improvements or no jobs in the RISE zone. So I'm not sure why that was done, but the reality is that retroactivity is not going to really affect this administration of the executive regulation. Also noted, there are currently no improvements and no jobs in the RISE zone, but as noted by executive staff and the college, there is the expectation that a site might be approved soon. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. A site has received preliminary approval of 150,000 square feet of research and development space, but the expectation is that they would need the tax credit in order to proceed, which is why we have the executive regulation now before us so that they can administer that.
I mean, they were relying upon that in their
That is correct.
their strategic plan.
And also, the executive staff has spoken with the state, and as long as they can get pre-certification before January 1st, 2023, they should still be able to receive the real property tax credits under the former RISE zone benefits, even if the development ends or will be completed after January 1st, 2023. So again, some of the need for the timing. The final thing I'll say is there, as noted in the staff report, the council cannot amend. We can't point them in. There's no edits the council can make to this regulation. It's either approve or disapprove. There are a few dates, as noted in section G of the definition section, as well as the retroactive section, that staff believes executive staff should update prior to final approval. We've spoken about that, and they can do that and note that change, even if the council approves it. And council staff believes that should be done just to have the correct dates in the executive regulation. And other than that, council staff does recommend approval for this executive regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pete, anything you want to add? The college is here.
No, I think Mr. Smith covered it very accurately.
Everyone's thumbs up.
Yeah.
So this is a time-limited exemption. So once you build your property and claim your exemption, there's only a certain amount of time that it's available. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And how many times can it be extended? Just once?
Once. But once
So-
again, as Gene articulated before, it's sort of the focus of how the program is administered, not administered, but what the benefits of the program have changed significantly. From property tax credits to actually rental, assistance with rental income for companies that would locate within the zone. And there are restrictions on those companies. They're basically targeted towards newer companies. It's also focused on technology companies. Once this change goes through, the company cannot be in existence for more than 3 years. They can't receive rental assistance for more than, I apologize. The company cannot have been in existence for more than 7 years. They can't receive assistance for more than 3 years, and that would require a match from the county as well.
So when this goes into effect, there's 5 more years, or when does it expire? It's 2023?
Yeah, so the clock started ticking for the RISE zone on September 28th, 2018. And so the first iteration will end on September 28th, 2023. The college may choose to reapply for another 5 years if they wish. They also don't have to reapply if they do not want the RISE zone designation to continue. That we have another year for that, year and a half for that to play out. So the college has not made a decision necessarily about that. But if the business, let's say the 150,000 square feet of research and development space is approved and built, they will receive the tax credits for 5 years, even if the designation expires. Once they are certified, a business will receive those real property tax credits for 5 years, just like an enterprise zone, once they're certified during that designation period.
And can it go beyond 5 years then, or that would require some kind of state? It's 10 years was the envisioned maximum, right?
No. I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I want to clarify. The zone itself, the period for the zone itself until it expires is 5 years. They can reapply again for another 5 years. So in total, you could have the zone existing for 10 years, but that requires a redesignation after 5 years. But again, as I made the point before, the focus of the benefits that are received has changed.
Right.
So the tax credit goes away after January 1, 2023.
Okay. Well, I hope we can, get this up fast enough to get the benefits. It'll be, I know everyone's doing everything they can. I suppose hindsight's 2020. Maybe we shouldn't have, instituted it immediately or waited. I don't know, but I know that there's this project that's moving forward, and hopefully this incentive will remain as an incentive. So hindsight's 2016, I think. Yes. Well said, Councilmember Friedson. All right. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you to the team up at Montgomery College and the Germantown campus. Really hoping for the best there. We got an amazing incubator at that campus, and this project with a hospital and incubator, some strong private investment and development with some tech companies, life science companies, would be spectacular. So we're really hoping for the best. All right. Thumbs up, all approved. Okay. Thank you. All right. That concludes our session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Sorry about that.
As